time. Our story is about men who are attempting to defeat it. Time is their enemy in the search for the ultimate origins of man, and they must deal with almost unimaginable amounts of it. For instance, suppose that the distance between us and those hills represents 4 million years. It is, in fact, 3 miles. Suppose that merely by walking back, we could turn back time. Each step would represent 500 years. Now we've covered 8 feet, around 2,000 years. This minute period is our local neighborhood in the universe of time. It's crowded with men and events. It contains the vast bulk of everything we've dreamed and learned and invented. Now let's walk again. Leaving the time of Christ, we'll traverse the great ancient civilizations. We'll pass landmarks, the first known written language, the roots of mathematics, the first flowerings of art. And before long, we'll have left civilization behind. All the rest of our 4 million years are 3 miles. That is prehistory. Just about 100 years ago, scientists began to probe this great void. Their experience is one of the great mystery stories of all time.
In southwestern France, there is a region of gentle hills and steep valleys called the Dordogne. Its historical landmarks evoke visions of past ages, the domains of dukes and barons, the splendor of great kings. One of the many villages clustered beneath the overhanging cliffs is famous, Les Aziz. It calls itself the capital of prehistory, and its most famous citizen is tens of thousands of years old. In the late 1800s, in and around Les Aziz, amateur archaeologists began to excavate under cliffs and in the mouths of local caves. While every civilization and religion had its own account of human origins, these were among the first men to search for solid evidence of their remote ancestors. One kind of man they discovered was almost indistinguishable from modern man in bone structure. So he was visualized as a kind of noble savage, a man of compassion, intelligence, and courage. But there was another kind of man living here at the same period. His skull was oddly shaped, his forehead was low, and a prominent ridge of bone jutted out above his eyes. This was Neanderthal man. He was judged a kind of brutal dimwit and became the villain in the popular melodrama of prehistoric times. Who was Neanderthal? What was he? Evidence indicates that his bizarre appearance is misleading. He is now regarded as an extinct racial variety of man, not fundamentally different from ourselves. Victorians considered him a near animal. Now he seems more a pioneer of human culture. Neanderthal lived in tribal groups, frequently in caves. Undeniably, his life was grim, uncomfortable, and brief, with life expectancy a mere 29 years. Primarily, he was a hunter. His staple food was the meat of reindeer and wild cattle. But he was cunning and strong enough to also bring down huge extinct mammoths and woolly rhinoceros. But amid his harsh struggle for survival, Neanderthal seems to have nurtured the first mystic stirrings of the human spirit. The ferocious cave bear had some symbolic significance for Neanderthal. Carefully arranged collections of bear skulls probably played a part in an ancient hunting ritual. Often Neanderthal buried his own dead, perhaps in family groups, along with objects of ceremonial significance. One such graveyard was uncovered in Palestine in the early 1930s. Some of the remains showed a mixture of the features of Neanderthal and modern man. This first clue to a close relationship between them spurred a massive excavation. In 3 caves on the slopes of Mount Carmel, Arab workers labored for 6 years. More than 3 decades have passed, yet the caves of Mount Carmel are still being probed. This ancient dwelling place may yield further revelations to University of Arizona anthropologist Arthur Jelinek. Many mysteries still surround Neanderthal man. It is yet to be explained how and why he disappeared from the earth about 35,000 years ago. Nor do we know where he came from. We can trace him back some 100,000 years, and then we enter a perplexing void in the story of mankind. The trail now leads still deeper into prehistoric times and to a place where all of Europe seems to be each summer, the Riviera. Lazare, a cave less than 100 yards from the water's edge in the city of Nice. Here, French prehistorian Henry de Lumley has directed one of the most remarkable excavations in recent years. The cave, until recently, served as a wine cellar. De Lumley suspected it might prove fruitful to excavate its ancient earthen floor. De Lumley's students soon uncovered stone tools of crude but unmistakable design, solid evidence of prehistoric man. In the modern age of excavation, mere earth has proven to be amazingly informative. Samples from Lazare were subjected to fine analysis. They revealed tiny seashells, and these contained radioactive elements which allow precise dating. It was proved that some form of man lived in the cave about 130,000 years ago. This is a period which has always been deeply mysterious, well before the age of Neanderthal. Further tests of soil samples revealed that the climate when the cave was occupied was humid and extremely cold, a vivid contrast with the Mediterranean today. Clarifying knowledge of the ancient environment, fossil pollen grains are, in effect, microscopic time capsules. Formed more than 100,000 years ago, they reveal the precise identity of plants which grew in prehistoric times. Within the cave, each team of excavators is responsible for a single 1 meter square. At each level of the descending excavation, they chart the location of every object found: natural rocks, stone tools, pieces of fossilized animal bone. The biography of one square, recorded over several years, reveals some layers almost barren, then deeper ones rich with evidence of man. As in any excavation, there is much tedious routine labor, but there is always the hope that meaningful patterns will emerge when all the evidence is brought together. A rough semicircle of rocks seemed to close an area along the cave wall. If only larger rocks were considered, the pattern was even more obvious. Then magically it was seen that all stone tools and fragments fell within this area except at 2 points, where there were gaps in the wall. Beyond reasonable doubt, then, man built some kind of shelter here in the cave mouth, protection against severe winds and cold. At one end, concentrations of embers and burnt bone pinpointed 2 fireplaces. But here, a puzzle. The seashells are abundant, yet it's unlikely that they were a source of food. Why should they be found here? Marine biologists contribute a key fact. Such marine animals are frequently found attached to certain seaweed, and masses of the weed are often washed ashore by storms. A guess. Could man have used the seaweed as a mattress, covering the improvised bed with animal furs? Confirmation. Animal claws, all that would now remain of the furs, are concentrated only with the seashells and nowhere else in the cave. Such detailed knowledge of how man lived in a remote period of prehistory is almost without precedent. But there is one crucial disappointment. Only a few fragments of human bone have been found in a far corner of the excavation. A fragment of skull, probably of Neanderthal's early ancestor. It is too incomplete to support firm conclusions, but it does bear one fascinating detail. This child was about 9 years old when he died of meningitis. The fatal lesion is clearly visible on the skull surface. So the picture of life in the cave more than 100,000 years ago remains incomplete. We know where and how man lived, what he ate, what he slept on, even what the weather was like. But the form of the man himself is missing. Now, if we travel back through time in Europe, the climate grows colder. Twice, over a period of 300,000 years, great glaciers creep down from the north and shroud the continent. In periods of extreme cold, man probably retreated southward. We know little of what he looked like, but evidence of his existence is overwhelming. He left these strange stone pavements and many of his tools in the Jordan Valley of Israel. Thousands of his stone cleavers and axes have been uncovered over much of Europe, Asia, and Africa. He even left his 500,000-year-old footprints to be discovered in Hungary. But what did he look like? What was his stage of evolution? The answers came from China in the 1920s, from a cave near Peking called Zhoukoutian. The excavation plunged 160 feet into the cave floor. From the dig poured a wealth of evidence of a primitive form of man nearly 500,000 years old. Best of all came bones of the man himself. 14 skulls and lower jaws, parts of 45 individuals. In volume and in knowledge gained, the cave was rich beyond imagination. In December 1941, the Japanese army invaded central China. And in the confusion of evacuation, the human fossils from Choukoutien disappeared. After the war, it was determined that American soldiers in charge of the fossils had lost them, but the Japanese had never found them. Nothing further is known. Today at the American Museum of Natural History in New York, precise copies of the Choukoutien fossils made before the war are carefully safeguarded. They, along with similar finds from the Far East, still provide the chief skeletal evidence of man before Neanderthal. We are called Homo sapiens. He is Homo erectus. He is so different from us, he is assigned to another species. But already 500,000 years ago, he was undeniably a tool maker and a user of fire. At the time of his discovery, it was assumed that Homo erectus spread from somewhere in Asia to colonize the world. But another continent had yet to be fully explored. Here we would discover that once long ago, there lived a creature which was more than an animal, but not quite a man.